Friends, colleagues, and listeners, here we are. We've got another show and a great show, I think. I'm confident in saying that in advance because our guest today is Nikki Ozols. And I had the pleasure of having a discussion with Nikki. I don't know, it must be a couple of years ago now, Nikki. But the one thing that came out of that discussion was how passionate you are and also how knowledgeable you are in a subject that is so important today. So before I let you just even say hello, Chris, I'm just going to introduce you. You are the MD of Aviation Safety and Compliance Limited. And my goodness me, you certainly are a professional with passion. So Nikki, over to you. Can you tell us exactly what you're doing in your new venture and how you've come to be there?
Hi, Chris. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me. Current venture, Aviation Safety and Compliance Limited, a little thing that I put together. We're doing a variety of different aviation safety and compliance related activities. So we've had a lot going on. We've been doing auditing, safety investigation, probably most busy with AOC applications, supporting organizations through getting their SMS approved so they can get their AOC. 145 SMS implementation, which everyone who works in sort of maintenance and engineering side will be aware that the countdown has started to implementation, and the CEA getting out there, making sure that our maintenance organizations are actually gearing up their safety management systems. Been doing some auditing. There has been a lot going on. Industry is, as always, the one thing we can always count on, subject to a hell of a lot of change, and a lot of that in the safety arena. So we've been making a nuisance of ourselves all over the land.
Brilliant, and well done. And I know about your background in safety and how passionate you are about it. Now, a couple of things that you just mentioned there is about what's happening and the build up and people needing certain things. Now, obviously, coming out of pandemic, and just before that, there was a lot of concerns anyhow about the way safety was developing. So now all of a sudden you've lost a lot of experience, shall we say?
Absolutely.
You've lost a lot of trainers, you've lost a lot of time because now everybody's trying to get back and catch up and they don't have the time to invest in people anymore. And now you've got such a surplus of good people, a shortage of good people, but a surplus of positions for those good people. So they're coming into it with a level of confidence that they probably haven't had before. So there's I think there's a lot of problems this year for safety related issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when you've done your audits,
you
do your health checks and your reviews, and you look at the SMS elements and everything. What's the biggest concern you'd have, or what would you say is, what the industry should be most aware of?
Oh, that's really interesting. There's so many. I'm going to go with probably the top one for me, is human factors. And I say that, industry professionals who, we've all got dogged copies now of the CAA's SMS implementation health checklist. The CEA have quite rightly started to measure and benchmark the industry on their human factors considerations, activities. And what I am seeing is, when I'm doing SMS evaluations and using that evaluation tool with organizations, yes, they've ticked the boxes. Human factors is mentioned as now a mandatory requirement in their safety policy. There is a risk assessment or two that considers human factors. There are a bunch of other, significant 7 risk assessments that include a one-liner on human factors. But what I'm not really seeing is a lot of integrity behind that. I'm seeing the boxes ticked. I'm seeing the manual references. I'm seeing the maintenance expositions that mention human factors. I'm not really feeling like I'm surrounded by people who are waving a flag saying, yes, my organization is really human factors considerate. I'm treated like an adult. I'm being developed. I've got flexibility to work in a way that makes me happy and feel comfortable. Unfortunately, we're going down the wrong route with this human factors thing.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you there, and I think the combination of everything that's been happening now, and the interesting thing there you said about the tick box exercise, I totally concur with you. Okay, and I think the integrity there of people who are accountable, and ICAO says clearly, you can delegate responsibility, you can't delegate accountability. I don't think people
Absolutely.
appreciate how far down that accountability chain goes and why they should be concerned if they're not involved. But one of the things there that you've covered is the combination of so many things that is now impacting on the human factor element, and people being rushed, people not enough people on shifts, people being asked to double up shifts, all manner of things, plus the root cause being it's the whole chain itself. So from carriers who
Yeah.
put unrealistic SLAs on, or too many KPIs, too many measures. We must have 4 people or 6 people instead of do the job safely. And a big fear of mine, I don't know if you found it as well, is on-time performance.
Yeah.
Oh, mother of Moses. If ever there's an incentive to cut corners and get bonuses, it's on-time performance. It should be safe performance.
Absolutely.
Of course, delays are of a few minutes here or a few minutes there, but my God, you want it to be done safely. And I think that's a little bit of a kick in your own pants.
I won't name the airline, but I went on holiday before Christmas and we were running late. We were running pretty late. It was that kind of delay that was coming up against FTL. We were getting into the go, not go situation. And we took over 2 hours delay because, and I won't name the airline, bags were loaded that had not been screened. We all know, we work in aviation, that is the absolute, unacceptable way to load an aircraft. You don't bring anything anywhere near an aircraft, let alone get an airside that hasn't been screened.
Correct.
Why did that happen? Because we started off with a maintenance delay, then there was a ground handling delay, and everyone got thrown into catastrophe, and then in a hurry to get us out of there, rushed the bags through and didn't load them properly. The bags were already loaded; they had to be offloaded and screened, which probably would have attributed to an hour of the delay in a big UK airport. You're absolutely right, Chris. That is rushing for the sake of leaving on time and putting on-time performance over safety. It just can't be. It can't go.
Yep. And that's a mindset, and it's an involvement, and it's an ownership problem that needs to come from the top, because some of the statistics that are out there and the focus that certain managers have now and have in the past put on OTP doesn't warrant the value of it. And also, as a result of it, how many incidents are not reported? You were talking about SMS, just culture. As a result of it, how many incidents are really not reported?
Absolutely, and that's just occurrences as a result of all of that pressure and that time limitation. Are people actually sitting down to report hazards that could mitigate from these things happening in the first place? Are people given the space to breathe and to say, hang on a minute, I'm concerned about what could be coming down the line if we carry on like this, which it also attributes to your psychological safety in the workplace. If you're not reporting occurrences, then you're probably not reporting hazards either. Things aren't going to get better.
Exactly. And the awareness of some senior managers is not there themselves. They're entering into a role, and their focus is very different. They might micromanage certain economic or certain volume KPIs or criteria, but they don't get as involved as they should do with some of the fundamentals that are all around business sustainability. And I think that's a shock. And obviously another factor is prior to the pandemic, the constant driving down of prices, which it has to give somewhere.
Absolutely.
And those prices are driven down and down and down. Well, then, you could do certain amounts of training. You've got to cut that back. You've got your line managers on the job training. Then you all sorts of considerations that under normal circumstances you wouldn't readily want to do if you were doing it properly. So I think the CAA also now has got a responsibility, and I believe they're addressing it, they're looking at the root cause for a lot of this lack of training and lack of controls when it comes to it. And you know, those things that we've just spoken about will come to the surface. With that in mind, and individuals, and you've mentioned physical safety and psychological safety, and when somebody has got, shall we say, a comprehension or an impression or a thought that they're not being developed, that they're not being listened to, that they're not being included, there isn't really a future, that they're only there as a job whereby they do some work, they get paid for it. I think over a period of time, that also affects the way people consider their managers and their companies.
I've left companies for that exact reason, Chris. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and it's sort of, do you know what I'm saying? Everybody thinks it's money or it's salary, but you know, some of those things are, you know, they're longer lasting. And I always tell anybody, especially anybody who's young enough to explore the world and the industry, if you're going for a job, you shouldn't be under pressure. It should be the company, because you should be asking them, how will you train me? How will you develop me? What sort of succession management do you have? Do you have risk? Do you have mitigation? Do you have all these things that make me feel safe in your company, which in turn makes your company's customers feel appreciated because they know you care. And then if everybody cares, you know, whether and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be all Walt Disney on it, but if everybody really does care genuinely, it makes the working environment a lot better.
Yeah, and Chris, you're absolutely right. And you've got that, you know, you've got that opportunity when you come into a company to ask those questions. And sometimes you get fantastic answers. And then your time moves on in the company, maybe your manager changes. But any manager worth their salt who listens to their team members, they'll see a change in you. They'll notice a change in the way that you work and the way that you carry yourself when you come into the office. Whether or not you're happy, whether or not you're stifled, how you contribute and what you contribute. And, you know, there's always it's never too late. There's always an opportunity. There's always an opportunity to say to someone, what's going on? Let me listen to you. Let me hear what it is that has impacted this change in you this way. You know, there's always a chance to turn it around. And you're absolutely right earlier on when you said, you know, you've got senior management focusing on the wrong things. You think if you think that people who want to be developed, you can't make the time for that, then you're in the wrong place anyway. But you're not focusing on the right things. And by not focusing on the right things, you're driving up attrition, you're driving up risk, you're driving up losing those skills, because you were too busy focused on, to your point, your KPIs, your on-time performance. What about all the people who know and understand why those KPIs aren't being met? You know, every airport, might be going off on a bit of a tangent, sorry, but, you know, every airport's got its own individual localized problems. You get a team in a ground ops department, you know, you get someone who intimately knows Birmingham Airport, and it is intimate, you know, an airport is so complicated. You get someone who knows, they bring all that wealth of knowledge, they know what to do, they know how to tackle the handling agent with the airport authority and get everyone together. And as soon as you stop focusing on those people and they go, well, sod this, I'm going to go to a competitor airline who are going to pay me more, who are going to stick by their word, you know, it's a no-brainer. Of course they're out the door.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think if, you know, if you were in a factory and you were manufacturing managers, the design and technology department now and the innovation department would be looking at making major changes to, you know, to roll out a different type of manager. And I also think so many managers just do not relate to or understand what is going on the floor because they're never there. And when they are there, it's either like, how's the family? Why is that pallet on the ground? Or they're not talking to people and with people. They're just doing it for the sake of doing it. And what I find is even worse is that they don't have any formal record of what it is they've actually covered. Because if you get managers doing the same formal record, employees will start to realise, well, this is what our management are focusing on. And we agree, because it's about us, it's about safety, it's about customer centricity, it's about cost management, all the, you know, revenue generation and protection, all those things. Then people start to realise there's a common thread and a storyline going through the company. But if they're not given that and they're not attending to it, and town meetings, and if people just turn up to give out awards or to say thank you, and then as they're talking to you, they're looking at someone else, that absolutely magnifies through an organisation. And the way people talk about some managers afterwards is terrible. And I think people have got to learn now, if you don't show that you care about your people, your people won't show that they care about the customers or the business. And it's critical.
But I think you make a good point, and it's not just showing that you care about people. Do you actually care? Because if you don't, if you're devoid of it, then maybe this isn't for you. And you should always respect your manager, of course, but your manager's not always right. Is your manager listening to you? And are they actually listening to their teams? Are they listening to people? What is it that you need? Here, what can we do differently? But you're right, and it's not just showing that you care. Do you actually care, or are you just a target-driven manager? Because you can't be.
No, I agree. And again, when somebody says there's a fear culture in the business, people overreact, but they don't think to ask, well, sorry, what do you mean? What element of fear are you talking about? And in most cases, it's the fear of not being listened to.
Yeah.
Being able to ask why. And one of the worst things in the world is to be told what to do, when to do it, and where to do it, but not to be given the appreciation that you'd like to understand why it's being done, or maybe why it's being done in that way, because you could offer an improvement or a change. So, no, I think the safety issue is a big thing. You mentioned risk assessments, risk register. I think coming out of COVID, people didn't focus enough on that. Worst case scenarios now should be almost a subject taught in business studies at school. I think people realise you have to plan for the unthinkable. But another thing that's coming up, and it's really critical at the moment, is inclusion and gender. And there's a lot more pressures now also being added to the normal business pressures of managers, to take into account gender issues and things like that. And I've been on panels, and I try to avoid the issue, not because it worries me or it concerns me, because I've got opinions which I've got no problem sharing. But
Chris has got opinions. No.
Yeah. Believe it or not, the old boy's still warm. But for me, it's all about professionals and people and persons. And I've got ladies who work for me all over the world, and I still keep in touch with them. And I've got the most respect for them because they were good at what they did, and at that time they were better than anybody else. So they got the job. But I do feel there's an awful lot of confusion now, and it's probably getting worse. But do you feel that there's still major problems within most of the businesses from your perspective?
It's such a good topic, and we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't, because the more we talk about it, the more we talk about a lack of inclusion, a lack of women in aviation, all we're doing is making the problem worse, really. We should be getting to a point, or we should be able to be at a point where we don't talk about women in aviation, because it's neither here or there. And to your point, the best person for the job is the best person for the job, regardless of their gender. But equally, I feel like we do still need to talk about it, because there are still a hell of a lot of problems out there. Let's face it, it's a male-orientated industry. And I think a lot of women in a lot of other industries would also say that, it's not specific to aviation. In other industries where industries are male dominated, there are challenges there as well. For me, my professional experiences as a woman, not great, actually. It's been a bit of a swimming against the tide. And I feel the need to support women in aviation, because I've had so many problems in aviation as a woman, dealing with male colleagues that have been inappropriate, difficult. Let's not go there. I think we all know what I mean by that. There's no need to be, overly controversial, but it's a problem that we both exasperate by talking about it. Yet if we don't talk about it, it's not going to go away. It's not going to go anywhere. So, you know, I absolutely maintain the best person for the job is the best person for the job. But the industry's still got some way to move on. It doesn't matter whether or not you're in the workplace, you're in a social setting. How do we still not understand to treat people equally? And it doesn't always happen. You know, I will say I have got a really sterling example. I work with a client at the moment. I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning them. They're called Jet Concierge Club. They're based at Stansted. They're a private jet operator. They have absolutely nailed their company culture. Now, you know, half of their post-holding team is female. The finance director is female. It's really neither here or there, because, you know, they are the best people for those jobs and they do those jobs perfectly. But their company culture, you know, they're a relatively small team. There is just an element of respect. I walk into their office. I have never felt so comfortable going to work around a group of people. And I've walked into a lot of situations where I have felt very uncomfortable working with a group of people, predominantly men. But they have just got such a lovely company culture. There is no two ways about it. People are polite to each other. If there was ever even an insinuation that women in aviation was a problem, it would be stamped out immediately. And they are just a great example. It can be done. There's no rocket science behind it. No one's doing anything special. They're just polite people with good manners. It's not hard.
But isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy, Nikki, that what you just said there about it's not difficult, it's not hard, and I know you're talking about gender issues at the moment, but like, I've worked in so many places around the world, and when I say work, I'm talking about actually live there as well. And I mean, just recently, nearly 7 years in Saudi, and I got to say, do you know what I mean? It was a really good experience. People say, "Oh, it must have been," but no, it was a good experience. All over the Middle East, Northern Europe, you know, America. Everybody's different,
Yeah,
and they are different, and it doesn't matter color, background, religion, whatever it is. Everybody's different, but equally, everybody's the same.
yeah.
They all have their families. They all care about what's going on. They all need to eat and drink and do all the things that are necessary. And sometimes that just one common ingredient that makes the difference is actually caring.
Yeah.
And if they cared, they'd be more polite. If they cared, they wouldn't be wanting to point somebody out, or, do you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, how do you feel yourself when you're down? And if it's because of somebody or something or a situation, then, you know, that's how others feel. And but equally, I think we're in a situation now where if it was a set of scales, we go from one extreme to the other instead of focusing on being close to the fulcrum and not having so much impact on society, and just tweaking it and tightening it up. And I think that's a problem. And unfortunately, the press and individuals, they love the extremes so that they can, you know, make people feel worse. I'd love to get up one day and see nothing but good news on the breakfast TV, pick up a newspaper and see nothing but nice, positive stories, because it'd make you feel better.
Wouldn't it? It's not happening anytime soon, though, is it? It's not great.
No, I don't think so, Nikki. I don't think so at all. Right, let me ask you something now. If you had the chance now to tell yourself when you were a young person deciding to come into an industry,
Yeah.
how would you sell the aviation to that person? And what considerations would you tell them they need to be aware of?
Oh, that's it. That's a really good question. Oh, Chris, you put me on the spot. I would say, and I might be slightly biased because I work in safety and compliance across all the AOC disciplines, airworthiness and maintenance, that the ability to find variety is outstanding. If you are someone who gets bored easily,
Yeah,
and that would be me. If you're someone who needs a lot of stimulation, a lot of things to keep going, who likes being busy, who likes to learn, then it is a great industry. And there will always be, I know we all know behind the scenes what a bloody nuisance it can be sometimes, but there will always be a magic to getting on a plane and going somewhere, anywhere that's not here, and to understand a bit more about how that works and how much goes into how that works and all of those complicated dynamic systems is just a privilege. It's a privilege to have access to learn all of these things, to have so many opportunities to find out about things that you would never ever in a million years have known existed. What should you be prepared for? It's tough on the way up.
Yeah.
It's really tough. You don't have to be resilient, but it helps. And if you didn't start resilient, you will end up resilient. With all of that opportunity also comes a steep learning curve. And that's not just, you know, regulations, technical understandings, it's people, it's dynamics, it's pressure, it's stress, it's how that affects people. I would also say, you know, there are going to be times when your own points of view and the things that make you tick and the things that you hold dear and your own integrity are going to be pushed and questioned at times. You know, if you're a young woman, there are going to be times when you're in a boardroom that's full of, you know, 80-90%, if not 100% men, and you're the only woman. And there are going to be times when you're going to have to check yourself and think, is this somewhere I can move forward and make change and be impactful, or is this not for me? Yeah, I could probably do another hour on this. What would you tell your younger self?
But it's interesting. It's interesting what you said there. You know, and like I said, working abroad or being in certain environments, like I've been in so many meetings and discussions, negotiations across Africa, Middle East. You know, even the old Ukraine and the Baltics, and in some of the cases, I've been the only non-local, or the only non. On a religious, I'm Irish Roman Catholic, and so you know, and what you just said there about being the only female in a boardroom, you know, you're right, and I think when you're not outnumbered, but when you are such a limited number, it's going to be in your mind, in your heart, and in your soul that you're different or you're under a bit of pressure. So again, that's where I think, like the opening statements or the opening introductions or the way people are, that's where the care should come straight away, so that they put themselves in the position of that person or that, you know, who's in the minority. And if you do that, and you do it, you only have to do it once very quickly, subconsciously, it makes you relate differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do another session, Chris, on the ridiculous things that I've heard in the boardroom on this topic. We could do a whole podcast on that alone.
Yeah, no, but seriously, Nikki, your passion and your enthusiasm for your subject matter and the industry and developing yourself and others is second to none. You're an absolute pleasure to talk with.
Thanks,
and wishing you great success. I'm sure you've already got it, and I would imagine you're going to be very, very busy this year.
Chris, I think everyone's going to be very busy this year. We've got a lot to turn around. Things aren't great, that people don't feel good. If one person listens to this and thinks, I've got that team member that's gone a little bit quiet, I'm just going to check in with them and make sure they're all right.
Yeah.
And fantastic. And you know, we spoke about development earlier on and having a plan in organizations. You know, if you don't have that for your people, then you're in the wrong place. You know, I know people are doing the best of what they've got, but just on that development and moving forwards, if I can just take a little shameless opportunity, female colleague of mine and good friend Laura Machado, excellent aerospace engineer, just at the close of business last year, approved by the UK CEA, continuing airworthiness post holder for the brilliant Jet Concierge Club. And it is just fantastic to see first of all, a woman in a very senior technical position, a woman who's worked extremely hard for it, for an organization that I think they took her from graduate actually, and they got her here. And it's just a perfect demonstration of how we can retain people and how we can get the best out of people when we hold them up like that.
Brilliant. Well, what we'll do after the show, we'll get her details and we'll try and get her on.
You will not get a word in edgewise, but good luck.
No. That's not a bad thing. All right. Listen, thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.